Hi friends, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and I am doing yet another installment of the freelancer Q&A that I do here, first as a live stream in Circle, and then syndicated on over to the Hit Subscribe community YouTube channel. I will announce this once again. Eventually I'll stop doing this, but we have renamed and rebranded the Hit Subscribe community YouTube channel, this channel slightly. It is now the community channel and not the Hit Subscribe channel. The Hit Subscribe YouTube channel is now a different thing, and that's where I'm actually creating marketing content for Hit Subscribe's marketing clients. So if you're interested in that channel, I'll put up the little I thing at the top here, and you can go check it out. So there are two different channels, just as a reminder, but this is the one where I talk about freelancing Q&A, and it is aimed at our community. Today I have a reader question from goodness knows how long ago. And I'll just read it. I have it up in front of me. The question is basically, do you have examples of developers niching down? Hi, Eric. Thanks for writing all of this great content on niching down. That's very kind of you. I know the concept from products on the one hand, on the other hand, from service businesses like from people like Philip Morgan, Jonathan Stark, and sites like doubleyourfreelancing.com. What I like about you is your focus on software developers versus designers and digital marketers. Do you have a few examples of devs successfully niching down? So I thought that might be an interesting question to tackle on this channel. The quick answer is not really, and I'll get into the philosophy of why I say that. I will give a few examples of people who come from a development background that I know who I think have had success in, let's call it niching down, one of whom is the aforementioned Jonathan Stark, and I'll describe what I think that looks like from a success perspective. But in general, I don't think niching down as a software developer is really a thing philosophically. So I want to spend some time talking through why, and then I want to go through some examples of, as asked here, people who have done this, and to kind of explain why I don't really think of it as niching down in software per se. And then I'll go through what developers usually mean when they talk about niching down, with some examples of that and why I don't think it's really niching down. So anyway, hopefully that's not all too confusing. Let me get into it. So philosophically, software development is a tactic, usually one that is aimed at creating some kind of efficiency through automation. And niching down, and let me see if I can dig up the video, but I've talked about the differences, between niching and specializing as I see it. So to me, a specialty is something that is kind of your secret sauce, your trademark thing that you do or whatever, what you're good at. And crucially, the outside person doesn't care all that much how or why you're good at what you're good at, as long as you can do something for them. So a specialty is kind of your business for the most part. A niche is something that is a gap in the marketplace. It's something that is a need that goes unmet. And I've given this absurd example before, but to make a distinction here, I talked about in a blog post long ago the idea that you could fill a niche without any competence whatsoever. So the blog post, if memory serves, was imagine that, like, for some reason radio frequency and like the laws of physics stopped working in the way that they do, and cell phones were no longer a thing. The only thing that worked was those old school landline phones. You could now fill this new niche, this demand, this need for a way to communicate that used to exist but doesn't any longer. You could fill that simply by having been a weirdo and hoarded an awful lot of corded phones that didn't require power and would just plug into old, like, Cat 4. If you had just happened to hoard a bunch of those phones for no particular reason, in this new universe I've created, you could easily fill a niche without even the remotest hint of competence. You would just happen to have these phones and people happen to want them. So that's what I mean about the difference between a niche and a specialty. A specialty is something you're good at. It's how you are uniquely good at delivering something that someone has in terms of a need. A niche is just the existence of a need that isn't being met. So when it comes to software development is a how, not a what. So as a software developer, you are fairly uniquely competent at serving all manner of niches, but actual software development doesn't fill any kind of niche. It's just a tactic for filling one. So I don't mean to be pedantic about it, but I think it's crucial to understand that nobody really needs software development per se. I mean, unless they're a dev manager tasked with hiring software developers in a commodified way. But you know, you need software development so that you do something else, and that's where the real need is. And I think that's important. And drawing that distinction means what are you doing when you niche as a software developer? I would argue that what you're doing is you're finding some unmet need in the market that just so happens to be well served by a specialty of software development. So let me now go through the examples that you're asking for that I thought of and kind of explain why I don't think software development per se is actually the thing filling the niche. So the first example I noted as I was thinking about this is Jonathan Stark, but not because of what he's doing these days with coaching around pricing topics. Back in the day when he and I were on the Freelancer show together, I remember, I think it was at that time that he was looking at doing like mobile consulting for credit unions. That was going to be his thing. And I think he did that for a while before pivoting into the full-time coaching that he's doing now. And that to me is filling a niche because I believe, and I don't mean to put words in his mouth, but this is just based on memories of 5 or 6 years ago or whenever we were doing this. But I think at the time, his idea was that credit unions are probably sort of technologically behind the time. They're maybe industry laggards in having a mobile app, and maybe they're feeling a pain there. So the niche that he would be filling there isn't software development, it's rather the existence of a certain kind of software, but it's really modernizing these historically stodgy institutions. It's helping them catch up in the market and capture potentially more market share and more users, and have and create a better user experience to keep up with banks maybe that have more resources to throw at these things. So that's really the niche that he's filling, is credit unions potentially falling technologically behind banks and other more well-resourced competitors. So really the software development piece is incidental, and I don't even know that he was going to do the software development, maybe just help them understand how to hire for that or staff it or whatever. But that's kind of what I'm getting at. The real niche there, at least in his market hypothesis, was the credit unions, feeling the squeeze of being laggards in adoption of this particular thing, and that he might be in a unique position to help them with that. So that's one answer, and it's also an example of how the software development itself isn't the niche. Another one that I can think of, speaking of the Freelancer show, I guess I could just go through a Rolodex of the folks that were panelists on that show, but Reuven Lerner, who does corporate Python training. And I think of, so that's Python development, kind of, sort of. And what he's doing is going into organizations and doing, I think, a lot of on-site training, probably still these days, in these enterprises. So he goes and flies out and goes on site, and the enterprises have people come in and do a several-day Python training course with Reuven. And again, that's ostensibly about software development, but really what he's doing is helping businesses that want to upskill their developers in Python, maybe because they're trying to get more and more into texts that are enabled by Python, whatever the case may be. But they also crucially don't really have the in-house expertise to do a dedicated targeted training with a lot of experience on that subject. So what Reuven is really doing in terms of filling a niche, again, it isn't software development. It's enterprises that want to do some training but don't really have the wherewithal to do it themselves. They don't have the resources and the expertise for that. So he is filling a training gap that exists in the enterprise. And it just so happens that the training orients around software development. There's also one-time hit subscribe author and longtime friend, Peter Morlian, and he is specializing in legacy code remediation. And again, this is around software development. It certainly involves having opinions on software development and how it should and shouldn't be done, and what you can do about a situation where you have a lot of legacy code or tech debt. But really, what you're doing if you're specializing in remediating tech debt or legacy code is you're serving a business that has probably been hamstrung in some way by being attached to a piece of technology they don't want to be attached to anymore. So if you have some legacy application, it might be that you don't have the people with the skills that were brought to bear to build that code. It might be that you don't even have the source code, but whatever it is, you have this dependency on some old set of decisions, and you're having trouble extricating it from yourself from it and keeping up with the needs of your business because you are tied to this thing. And that's the niche that you're in, is probably somebody in leadership that is feeling particularly deprived of options because of past decisions, and they don't have a great path forward. So again, that's the niche, that's the demand in the market, that's the need that somebody is willing to pay for. Again, going back to and channeling Jonathan Stark, you would call this an expensive problem. Your niche is the expensive problem that you're solving. So with Jonathan Stark, the expensive problem was credit unions lagging behind in technology. With Reuben Lerner, it's the expensive problem of your staff not being up to snuff on a technology you want them to be. And with Peter, it's the expensive problem of being overly tied to precarious technologies that are holding you back. So hopefully that kind of illustrates the point. Those are examples of niching down in software development, but it's really examples of how niching down isn't really about software development. What you do is you identify the actual needs, the organizational niches, and then you can think about how and if software development could satisfy those niches. And I think you're really onto something in terms of thinking through niches. If you recognize that there are a lot of cases where it could be that not writing any software at all is the best solution to the problem. And that might be a good litmus test for whether you're solving a problem or whether you're supplying commodified labor, which is usually what you're doing. If you're selling software development labor, you're selling your labor as a commodity. So if you're engaged with clients and they come to you and they have questions about what you should be doing, I would argue that you're potentially serving a niche if one of your answers might be do nothing or don't use software development at all. And you're doing more commodified labor if your thoughts are you should always do the thing because I do the thing. So anyway, that's just kind of a litmus test that you could maybe apply. Because if you're solving a problem for clients, you can recognize when they're coming to you and they don't actually have the problem that they think they do, or that, sure, you could solve this problem, but won't actually move any needle, or it will be a Pyrrhic victory. It will be too expensive for you to solve the problem for it to be worth doing. And in all of those cases, the software development piece of it would be an implementation detail. You need to be helping them with their problem in a way where you can recognize whether the problem is worth solving or not. And that's when you're really, onto a niche. So let me transition into what I had talked about in the beginning, which is I think of this as traditional things when software developers going freelance talk about a niche. Here are some things that I think they tend to mean by that. The most common one, I think, is niche down, and that's a term I don't like because a niche is a need. It's a soft spot in the market. There isn't like up or down. Usually if you're talking about niching down, what you're probably referring to is tightening up your segmentation, like who your buyer is, and that I believe in, but I want to draw a crucial distinction for this reason, because the number one thing that I see software developers mean and miss the point when they talk about niching down is, oh, well, I'm a C# developer, but I should really be a C# developer that specializes in connecting to Oracle databases and using that driver. So that's what you mean by niching down, is getting more specific and granular and detailed in how and which technologies you're using. And that might make for more specificity, but it's in a really commodified way. It would just make it easier for somebody to find you as the first entry on Upwork if they're looking for labor. So I don't want to be a C# laborer. I want to be a C# Oracle laborer. You're getting more specific about what you do, but remember, you're getting more specific about the how. This is how I do it, not what. So what problems are you, before you've been solving any problem that can be solved somehow with C#. Now you're solving any problem that can be solved somehow with C# and Oracle, which admittedly is probably a somewhat smaller set of problems that a somewhat smaller set of people might be interested in, but it's still an incredibly nebulous problem space unless they're saying, I need someone specifically to come and help because I've got a C# code base and an Oracle database, but that's really just pseudo employment or just employment. So by niching down in this sense, you're actually removing yourself even further from the actual value that your buyer might have from the actual niche itself. So that's what I really, really don't like, is I'm going to get more specific by having a smaller little section of Stack Overflow that I've carved out and established for myself. I wouldn't do that. Other way I see, or another way that I see software developers kind of miss the point when they're talking about niching down is going into info products that just happen to be teaching people something you know how to do. So going back, you're a C# developer that happened to have the relatively unusual combination of C# on top of an Oracle database, that you start to say, oh, well, here's what I know how to do, C# and Oracle, so I'm going to make info products about C# and Oracle. Now, I could argue that this is slightly more of a niche because ostensibly there is some demand out there for people who want to learn to DIY on C# and Oracle. So there might be actually a pretty weak value proposition type of demand by somebody who has little to no money to spare, so it's not really a good business. And in a whole other video I've done, I don't really like info products as a business anyway. I think that they are marketing collateral for a real business, not a business themselves. But this is another thing that I see software developers commonly do, is niche down in the sense of, my niche is people who are just like me, except a year or two earlier than me, that I can teach how to do this thing. And I guess that's more of a niche than the thing where you decide to get more specific in your commodity labor, but it's a pretty weak niche, and you're appealing to somebody that has little to no money to bring to bear for your problem, and the numbers are really poor for supporting this as a business. I would also not do this. The other thing that I see developers do a lot when it comes to niching down is, I think of it as like building a better mousetrap kind of, or, this is called an entrepreneurial seizure in the E-Myth Revisited books. Essentially, you're a developer, you go off on your own, and your niche is going to be, I do TDD and I'm religious about it, or I, really know how to do Agile or value stream, or, whatever. But you go off on your own and you make it your thing that you are going to be the definitive expert in this, and you are going to have this hammer and all problems are nails. And if everybody just did latest and greatest technique and they did it right and listened to me, then everything would be good, and you should hire me for something because I'm very knowledgeable about this specific thing that I'm passionate about. You can maybe scratch out a living on this, but again, I don't know that there's a lot of, it's not a niche. There isn't really a lot of demand for, no offense, but a blowhard about some tactic. I mean, that's a pretty commodified position. For instance, if you're out there saying, like, I'm a real, Agile or extreme programming purist or whatever, and I know all the right ways, there are a lot of people out there claiming that, and there are an awful lot of whatever coaches out there floating around doing that kind of stuff. Are you really the most knowledgeable one, or are you just the most fervent? So, that's not really solving any unique problem. You can probably earn a living. I mean, maybe not the info product one, but like with any of these things that I said, but I don't want anyone confusing that with niching. That's just, choosing a soapbox, or it's choosing a specific set of technologies that you really want to work with. All of these things, by the way, share something in common, which is that they're all extremely navel-gazy. They're all really focused on you and what you know and what you think and what you want to do. A true niche is when you're really focused on a problem that somebody has, and you get to know the relatively intimate details of how that problem manifests and what other problems it causes and what the symptoms of it are. And you're very externally focused about your buyers and what they go through. If you get onto sales calls, you will find that you are able to pretty quickly out of the gate, when people are telling you, yeah, I'm having these problems, you say, let me guess, you've tried this, this, and this. These things work, these things didn't. You're talking to me because X. If you are that good at a cold read, you have probably found a niche. You have probably come to deeply understand a problem that somebody has and how that can be solved. And when you have that deep understanding, you will probably have a lot of different tactics some of which may or may not involve writing code that can be brought to bear to solve that problem. So that is my lengthy and hopefully not overly pedantic take on the idea of niching down. I think that software development as a craft or a trade or relatively commodified labor is sort of mutually exclusive with niching, because commodified trade craft is really about what you're doing, not what your customer needs or what problem the customer needs solved. So developers, I think, succeed in finding niches when they stop thinking about software development and they start thinking about a problem they can solve. And probably if you want to keep your hands on the keyboard and writing code, you would look at the intersection of those things as what problems are there out there in the market that are currently unsolved or suboptimally solved that I can solve, and I can do so by leveraging programming as part of what I'm doing. So I hope that is somewhat helpful for those of you out there watching. If the original question asker is still out there and consuming any sort of content like this, hopefully this is still helpful all these years later, and I will catch you all next time.